Over the last few weeks, I've shared some thoughts on camera gear with you and just some things to think about before you buy gear. And one of the things that is easy to overlook, but can be very important actually, is just your camera bag. So I thought I would just record a very short podcast just chatting about the kind of things I think of when I'm looking for a camera bag and the things you might want to think about if you're looking to invest some money in one. So I'm going to start with the style, but what we come back to in the end is, I guess, the primary thing to think about is what kind of photography are you doing? What gear are you going to have to take with you? Where are you going to have to take it? And are there other things that you need to carry with you? So just to explain more about what that means, I do a lot of wildlife photography, and sometimes that means I have to hike for a few hours in different terrains. So that might be in a warm area, it might be sandy kind of ground, there might be trees around, that sort of thing. So that's one thing. Alternatively, I might be having to do quite a long hike in hilly country where it's wet, there's a lot of vegetation around, so it's quite slippery, all that kind of stuff. And definitely one of the things I want to do is, first of all, to keep my hands free, because I might need to be holding a stick of some sort. I might need to be able to grab onto things or climb over rocks or do things like that. So certainly when I was training to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, I did some hikes in New South Wales, and some of those hikes were in reasonably remote areas. And I've got to tell you, I had a kind of sinking feeling when I'm on one of these tracks that people use through these national parks, and you see a big rock in front of you, and there are iron kind of hand grip things hammered into it. So that to me was never good news, because I had a small backpack on those occasions, but I still had weight in it. So I'm then thinking about how I need to bend over to keep my center of gravity in a place where I'm not falling over and landing on my back and on top of all my gear. So that's the first thing. Where are you going to be going with it? I've kind of alluded to one part of it, and that is, what's the weather like? Because if you're in an area where you might be rained on, or there might be thunderstorms or things like that can roll in fairly quickly, you really want to have with you things like a rainproof jacket, maybe a hat, hood, things like that, and something to protect your camera gear and also to protect your camera bag. So the thing you might need to have in there might be your raincoat. There might be other things, gloves, whatever it might be. So the first thing to think of is that your bag might not be just about the camera gear, but also other things that you want to have with you when you're doing these kind of treks. That might also include food and water, by the way. But you're going to have to carry them with you. So the bag needs to accommodate those sorts of things as well. The other thing about that, and something I found very useful, and I have it on all of the camera bags I have, and I've got 3 I'm using at the moment, slightly different sizes and styles, and that's to have a waterproof cover that will fit over the bag. So what some companies do, mine are mostly low pro, they have a zip compartment in the bottom of the bag, and if you unzip it, you'll find this plastic cover thing will come out and completely cover the bag. It's elasticated, and you can, I think, tighten them up. At least one of them you can. And so if you do get caught in a rainstorm, it does mean that your bag is protected from the water, and obviously anything you have in there is also protected. So one other tip while I think about it, if you have a backpack, and this is just generally, and it has a zip on it, and you don't have a waterproof cover, always make sure you do the zip up or have the zip tabs down on one side. Don't have the zip tabs at the top. So the opening, basically where you pull the zips apart to open the bag, if it's one of those kind of things, always have that little gap, because there's always a little gap where the zip closes, always have that on the side, not on the top, because if you have it on the top and you've got a lot of water coming at you, the chances are some water is going to get inside. Whereas if you have that little gap on the side, you are likely to stand a better chance of keeping things dry. So, styles of backpack, what are we thinking of? So there are a few around. There are small ones. You've got the backpack style, and you have others that are more like a bag you would hand carry. Now, I just thought of another bag I've got, but never mind. That's I don't use that too much these days. So I generally use backpacks simply for the reason that, like I said, I like to keep my hands free. I can get a reasonable amount of stuff in there, and basically all the stuff that I need for that trip. And the thing I always look for though on a backpack is to make sure that it has hip straps. And the reason for that is simply that when you have hip straps, it means most of the weight of what's in the bag goes through your hips. It's carried on those hip straps and not on your shoulders. So basically it helps to drop your center of gravity. And I feel a lot more stable, first of all, when I'm using a bag with hip straps. And secondly, I find it really easy to just walk around with quite a heavy backpack when I've got the hip straps. So I'm actually a lot more comfortable. There's no issue walking. As my center of gravity is lower, it's down towards my hips and not up on my shoulders or up on my back. I feel less likely it's less likely I'm going to keel over if I, am climbing up one of these horrible rock things with these iron rings in them to step on and hold on to. So I love those. But even just walking about, it's a lot more comfortable. So that's the first thing, I guess, when you're choosing the style of bag. Think about comfort is the main thing. So obviously, I'll talk about size in a moment, but you definitely want a bag that's comfortable if you are likely to be walking with it for several hours. So hip straps, absolute. I won't buy a backpack now that doesn't have hip straps because if I've got enough gear to warrant a backpack, unless it's a tiny little day pack, then that to me says I know for my own comfort, I much prefer the hip straps. So there you go. Okay, next thing. Let's talk about size and weight. So the bag obviously needs to be big enough to carry whatever gear that you're going to have to take with you, plus anything else you might need. So I've mentioned waterproof jackets. I've mentioned food and water. So all of those things will need to be accommodated. There's no point getting a bag that's exactly right for the camera gear you're taking, and then you've got all this other stuff you don't know what to do with. So it needs to be suitable. Equally, you don't want a bag that's too big because, again, there's not much point lugging around a big bag because they get bulky. A bag on your back is quite a sizable thing, and it means, particularly if you're trying to get through narrow areas, whatever that might be, or even walking down streets sometimes, it can be a bit of a nuisance if you're trying to thread your way through people or rocks or trees or whatever it might be. So you've got to get that balance right, that you're using the right sized pack. And you may well end up with more than one pack so that you're using them for different sort of applications. That again comes back to what's the photography you're doing, where are you doing it. The other thing is that some manufacturers tend to make quite heavy bags. This might be to compensate for low quality materials. You're going to have to make a call on that, but you want it to be strong, you want it to be waterproof, but you really don't want the pack to be that heavy if possible, because with camera stuff, that's pretty much always pretty heavy. So you're going to be putting heavy things in there, and the less that the bag contributes to overall weight, the better. So have a think about size and weight. Make sure it's the right size, not too big, not too small, the sort of Goldilocks thing, and go from there. You also want something that won't slip off your shoulders if you're using a backpack. And I've found this with bags that are just shoulder straps, and another reason why I don't like them is they're uncomfortable to wear because you have that constant feeling they're about to slide off, or one strap will slide down your arm and things like that. And that you just really don't want that. So my experience with the better quality bags, we'll call them that have the hip straps, is that you can also adjust the shoulder straps. So you want, and again, a lot of people don't get the strap adjustment right. You often see people walking around with a backpack and it's slapping them in the backside. So that pack is way too low. You need to be adjusting the straps so that the top of the pack is around the base of your neck. So basically it's shoulder level or slightly above shoulder level, that sort of height. So if your bag is halfway down your back or hitting your backside, that's too low. So that's the first thing. Get the height correct because that will make the bag more comfortable. And often what you'll find in the better quality bags is that there's a little clip between the two shoulder straps that you can just, so it's just a little strap with one of these little plug-in clip things. And again, use that. So just adjust it so that it's at the right tension to keep the straps right and that you can still breathe. But have a look around. So get a bag where you can adjust the straps properly and you can just clip the straps together so that they don't slip off, so that they stay in place. Because if you're in a place where it's a bit tricky, you might be going up that rock I keep talking about, or you're going through trees or whatever, there might be animals around that you don't want to disturb. You want to be concentrating on where you're putting your feet, what's around you, what you don't want to be walking into. You don't want to be distracted by feeling that your backpack is about to slide off. So it might sound trivial, but it's actually important when you're at the point of choosing a bag that you just think about these kind of considerations. Now, another thing, again, depending on what you're using, is it has to be easy to open. You need to be able to get to what's in the bag fairly quickly. So the backpacks I have mostly open from the top or the side. You can get in that way. I've got another one that does open from actually the back. So there's sort of a little bit of padding that goes against your back, but there's actually a zip in that and you can get in one side through there. It's a bit inconvenient, but having said that, to get into a backpack, most of the time you have to take the pack off anyway. So from that perspective, it's not that big of a deal. Another bag I have is not a backpack. It's more of a bag, but has a long shoulder strap. And again, what I do there, when I'm putting it on my shoulder, rather than just have this bag hanging off one shoulder, I stick my head through the strap. So it's still on one shoulder, but it's now the other one. And basically, I've got my body partly through the loop, if you can visualize that. And again, it makes it more comfortable to carry because the bag can't slide off because it's got to slide over my neck's in the way to stop it sliding off that way. And then the other direction, my arm's there, but it's really hard for it to slide off that way. And the thing I like about that bag, so it's another Low Pro. So I'm not particularly promoting Low Pro. It's just I seem to have a few of their bags. But that one has a zip in the top section. So it has a big top. It's kind of a squarish thing and has a flap that goes over the top of it, which clips down. But in that flap, there's a zip right through the middle of it, across the length of the bag, and that will unzip. So it's actually very easy to get things out of the bag, almost anything out of the bag, without taking the bag off and popping it back in again. So again, you would need to just investigate what works best for you. But I think that is something just to think about. It's a bag that, to be fair, I've used it more when I've been in land vehicles and I just chuck it on the floor. But it does mean that I can quickly reach in and get a camera out. So I generally have my backup camera with a wide angle zoom on it. And that can either go in the bag, or maybe I'll just leave that zip open and stick the lens through and just sort of have it, the camera resting on that bag so that it's easy to get out again. That brings me on to another thing, and that is the partitions. So what a lot of bags have these days that you're likely to buy are these sort of Velcroed partitions. And that means that you can pretty much configure the bag as you wish. That is good. I think you want to get a better quality one though, because you don't want the Velcro, you don't want partitions moving when you don't want them to. So you need to be able to Velcro them down and they stay pretty much in place. But I do prefer those bags because I'm not always carrying the same gear. And it does mean that I can just change the partitions around to make sure that lenses I put in there are protected, the camera body's protected. There's a bit of padding between a lens and the body, for example. And it does mean I can create a little bit of space to chuck in nibbles to eat or whatever else I'm carrying. And in addition to the partitions, you also just want to think about the pockets that are on the bag, because you might want to just have space where you can quickly get to a spare SD card, for example, lens cleaning kit. It might be the microfiber cloths or cleaning fluid, all that sort of stuff. So think about what are the kind of things you might want to access fairly quickly when you're wearing the bag, and where you're is there space to put those things? Another thing I quite like is having a strap and a pocket on the sides. Often they're on both sides. I think they're primarily intended for tripods, which you may or may not want to carry, but you definitely, if that's consideration, then yep, there's definitely got to be a spot for the tripod to go. And the tripod will live outside the bag because they're pretty robust. It's quite hard to actually break a tripod, to be honest. So they'll fit outside. And if you've got a larger one, it won't go in the bag anyway, or you've got to leave the zip open at the top. And of course, that means you can't cover the bag properly if it starts to rain, and you're going to get water and maybe other things getting inside the bag, which you don't want. So those are useful, but I like them to put a water bottle. That's where I tend to have my water bottle, because I can generally reach around and just grab it. Or I can ask somebody who's with me just to pop it back in the pocket and put the strap over the top of the bottle so it doesn't fall out. But that I found very handy when I've been wandering around different places, and I always like to have water with me because it's really important that you stay hydrated. So just think about that, just step back from the bag itself, think about the kind of environments you're going to be in. It may just be a car or a boat, or you might have to hike a bit, as I've described. How are you going to handle the bag? Is it something that you can drop down on the floor? Do you have to carry it very far? All these sorts of things. If you are carrying it some distance, then it really wants to be as comfortable as possible. Even when it's fully loaded, you still need to be able to carry all that weight in a way that's comfortable and is not straining your back in particular and shoulders. So have a think about all of that. Think about what you're likely to be taking with you in terms of the camera gear. What other things are you likely to be taking as well, and can you get all of that in there, or is it becoming, a bit of a struggle getting all of that stuff in? So that's really it. I hope that's given you some ideas if you're thinking about a bag. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. I tend to get them occasionally. The last bag I bought was for when I was going to Uganda, because my main bag I felt was too big. And that equally applied to the flights out there as well. So that is another further consideration, that having got your bag, if you're going somewhere where you have to fly to your destination, will that bag, is it lockable if you're just going to use it as stowed luggage? Because probably, some bags you can take as carry-on. So that's another consideration. And I like, in fact, the bag I was talking about with the zip on the top, that sort of squarish thing, I'll often use that as my carry-on bag, because I can get in there not only my camera and lens, but also the stuff I just want to have with me in case my main bag gets lost for any reason. And also I use solid state hard drives as a backup to my laptop. So in that bag, I can generate, my laptop thing is quite light, so that will go in. The SSD drives almost float away. They're very light, but they can go in that bag as well. So it does mean not only on the sort of hiking parts of the trip, but on the traveling parts where I'm not particularly going to do any photography, but I'm getting from A to B and back again, I've just got the right sort of setup to handle all of that. So again, this might be perfectly obvious to you. If it is, I apologize. If it isn't, maybe it's given you some ideas and some thoughts about what are the fundamental and most important specifications of your new camera bag. That's it from me for now. I hope you've enjoyed that. Another short one, and I'll speak to you in the next podcast. Bye for now. Oh, and one thing just before you go, please take a look at the 2026 wildlife calendar. That's available now. It's on the website. There's a link below the description of this podcast episode. So please take a look, and I'll speak to you next time. Bye now.